I died a hero, but they buried me a monster. I sacrificed my legs and my future to pull a mother and daughter from a burning bus. Their repayment, they destroyed my life. Now, staring at them on that exact same bus, I'm making a different choice. I'm walking away. The smell of burning flesh is something that never truly leaves your memory. It burrows into the deepest crevices of your brain, lingering like a phantom scent, long after the wounds have supposedly healed. For 3 years, that was all I could smell. My own flesh, roasting like meat on a spit, fusing with the synthetic polyester of the bus seats. My name is David Miller. In my previous life, I was 28 years old, an architect on the verge of a promotion, engaged to the woman of my dreams, Emily Davis. I had a future. I had a functioning body. And then I took the 3 p.m. city transit route 42. I remember the deafening crack that tore the world apart. A gas main underneath the street had ruptured just as a spark from a passing maintenance truck ignited it. The explosion didn't just hit the bus, it swallowed it whole. Most of the passengers were incinerated instantly, vaporized in a flash of blinding white heat. But I survived the initial blast, and so did they. Sarah Higgins and her 7-year-old daughter, Lily. They were trapped 2 rows ahead of me, pinned beneath a warped metal beam as the flames began to lick at the hem of Sarah's dress. I could have crawled out the shattered window. I should have. The structural integrity of the bus was failing, the heat was blistering, and the fire was creeping toward the ruptured fuel tank. But I heard the child screaming. I heard the mother begging for someone, anyone, to help. I didn't think. I acted. Adrenaline masked the agonizing pain as I grabbed the searing hot metal beam with my bare hands. I remember the sickening hiss of my skin melting against the steel. I ignored it. I dragged Sarah out first, throwing her through the emergency exit. Then I went back for Lily. The smoke was blinding, toxic, and suffocating. As I threw the little girl out to her mother, the bus shifted. A secondary explosion from the engine block sent a wave of pure, concentrated fire directly over my lower body. I spent 6 months in a medically induced coma. When I finally woke up, my legs were gone, amputated above the knee due to severe necrosis and 4th-degree burns. My hands were gnarled, twisted claws of scar tissue. I had given everything to save them. For a fleeting week, I was a local hero. The news stations called me the Angel of Route 42. But heroes don't pay the bills, and they certainly don't stand a chance against the vicious machinery of human greed. It started with a subpoena. Sarah's husband, Richard Higgins, was a high-powered corporate litigator. He didn't see a tragedy, he saw a payday. 6 months after I learned to navigate the world in a wheelchair, the Higgins family filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the city, the transit authority, and unbelievably me. The lawsuit alleged that my reckless and medically improper extraction of Lily had caused a permanent tear in her brachial plexus, leaving her left arm partially paralyzed. They claimed that if I had just waited for the professional paramedics, she would have been fine. They completely omitted the fact that the bus had been consumed by a fireball exactly 40 seconds after I pulled them out. I will never forget the day in court. Sarah Higgins sat on the witness stand, wearing a perfectly pressed, modest dress, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "He was just so aggressive," she sobbed, looking directly at the jury. "He yanked my baby like she was a rag doll. I begged him to be careful, but he wouldn't listen. It felt like he just wanted to play the hero, no matter who he hurt in the process." The media turned on me overnight. The narrative shifted from heroic architect to reckless vigilante. The legal fees drained my life savings. My insurance dropped me. But the killing blow didn't come from the judge's gavel or the crushing financial ruin. It came from Emily. One rainy Tuesday, I wheeled myself into our apartment to find her packing her bags. She couldn't look me in the eye. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered, her voice devoid of any real warmth. "I didn't sign up to be a caretaker. And honestly, the public scrutiny, the debt, the hatred. I can't be tied to you anymore." She walked out, leaving me in an empty, dark apartment. Stripped of my wealth, my reputation, my legs, and my love. I deteriorated. The stress compromised my weakened immune system. A severe blood infection took hold. As I lay dying in a sterile, underfunded public hospice ward, utterly alone, my final thought wasn't a plea for salvation. It was a curse. I cursed Sarah Higgins. I cursed Richard. I cursed Emily. But most of all, I cursed myself for ever standing up from that bus seat. My heart monitor flatlined. The darkness took me. And then I blinked. My eyes snapped open, my chest heaving as if trying to suck in the entire atmosphere. My hands flew to my face, expecting to feel the rough, uneven ridges of scar tissue. Skin. Smooth, unblemished skin. I looked down. My legs were there, clad in the familiar dark denim jeans I hadn't worn in 3 years. I could wiggle my toes. I could feel the dull vibration of the floorboards beneath my boots. The floorboards. I looked around, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The faded, graffiti-stained plastic seats. The smell of cheap vinyl, stale coffee, and diesel exhaust. The rhythmic thump-thump of the tires rolling over the cracked pavement. I was on the City Transit Route 42 bus. My eyes darted to the digital clock glowing in red at the front of the cabin. 3. 1 p.m. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The gas main explosion at 5th and Elm happened at exactly 3:20 p.m. I was back. Somehow, through some twisted glitch in the universe, I had been thrust back into the exact moment my life was destroyed. My gaze shifted instinctively 2 rows forward. There she was, Sarah Higgins. She was wearing the same beige trench coat, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon sun. She was aggressively tapping on her smartphone, her voice carrying over the engine noise. "I don't care what the meeting is about, Richard. You promised you'd be at the school by 2. Now I have to drag Lily across town on public transit like some commoner. You are unbelievable." Next to her, 7-year-old Lily was oblivious, furiously playing a game on a tablet. A wave of nausea washed over me, immediately followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. The sheer audacity of her existence in my line of sight made my blood boil. My hands, my beautiful, unscarred hands, clenched into fists. In my mind, I saw her fake tears on the witness stand. I heard the judge ordering me to liquidate my assets to pay for a trauma fund for a child. I had literally walked through hellfire to save. 3:1 p.m. The bus rattled as it hit a pothole. I looked around. There were only about 8 other people on board. An elderly man sleeping in the back, a teenager wearing oversized headphones, a woman reading a paperback novel. In my previous life, none of them had survived the initial blast. The explosion had ripped through the back half of the bus first. Only those near the middle and the front, me, Sarah, and Lily, had even a fraction of a second to react. A voice in my head, a relic of the naive, self-sacrificing fool I used to be, whispered, "You have to warn them. You have 4 minutes. Scream about a bomb. Get everyone off." But then another memory flashed. The sheer agony of the skin grafts. The phantom pains that kept me screaming into my pillow at 3 a.m. Emily's disgusted grimace as she looked at my stumps. And Richard Higgins' smug, triumphant smile as he won the settlement that bankrupted me. If I screamed about a bomb, what then? I'd look like a lunatic. The driver wouldn't listen. Or worse, the police would investigate, and I'd be the prime suspect for predicting a random gas main explosion. I would be locked away, interrogated, my life ruined yet again, just in a different way. No, I couldn't save everyone. I couldn't even save myself if I tried to play God. 3:11 p.m. The automated voice overhead chimed. Next stop, 4th and Maple. This was it. The last stop before the bus turned onto Elm Street. The stop before the inferno. I stood up. My legs, God, my legs felt so strong, so sturdy. I reached up and pulled the yellow stop request cord. A sharp ding echoed through the cabin. I walked down the aisle, passing right by Sarah Higgins. She didn't even look up from her phone, still fiercely texting her husband, a scowl on her face. I looked at the little girl, Lily. A pang of dark conflict hit my chest, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard reality of my past life. If I saved her, she would grow up to hate me, brainwashed by her parents to view me as the monster who broke her arm. Let God sort them out. The bus hissed to a halt. The rear doors swung open. I stepped down onto the concrete sidewalk. The warm afternoon air hit my face. I took a deep breath, savoring the absolute freedom of being whole, of being alive.
The doors clamped shut behind me, the heavy diesel engine revved, and the bus pulled away from the curb, merging back into traffic, heading directly toward 5th and Elm.
I didn't run. I didn't turn away. I walked exactly 50 paces down the street, stopping at a small corner cafe with outdoor seating. I pulled out a $20 bill, slapped it on the counter, and ordered a black coffee from the bewildered barista. "Keep the change," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was beating out of my chest. I turned around, leaning against the brick wall of the cafe, and looked down the street toward the intersection of 5th and Elm. Uch, yirmepeme. The world went silent for a fraction of a second. Then, the pavement at the intersection erupted. It was even more terrifying from the outside. A massive geyser of orange flame and black smoke tore through the asphalt, directly beneath the chassis of the city transit bus. The force of the blast lifted the massive vehicle entirely off the ground. The windows shattered outward in a million glittering shards, accompanied by a shockwave that rattled the windows of the cafe next to me, setting off a dozen car alarms in the vicinity. The bus slammed back down onto the street, instantly engulfed in a roaring, furious inferno. Screams began to fill the air. Pedestrians on the street dove for cover. Plumes of thick, toxic black smoke rolled up into the clear blue sky. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was burning hot, but the heat felt good. It felt like reality. I watched the flames lick the twisted metal skeleton of the bus. There was no movement inside. There was no hero dragging a mother and daughter from the wreckage. There was only ash. I felt no guilt. I felt a profound, chilling sense of peace. The universe had course corrected. Sarah Higgins would never lie on a witness stand again. Richard Higgins would never steal my life. Sirens began to wail in the distance, a rising chorus of panic approaching the scene. I lowered my coffee cup, preparing to turn and walk away, to start my life over. But as I scanned the chaotic street, my eyes locked onto something that made my blood run ice cold. Directly across the street from the explosion, parked in the alleyway between a bank and a closed bookstore, was a sleek, black Mercedes sedan. The tinted window on the driver's side was rolled down just enough for me to see the face of the man inside. It was Richard Higgins. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't reaching for his phone to call his wife. He was just sitting there, his hands resting calmly on the steering wheel, watching his wife and child burn to death with a faint, satisfied smirk on his lips. My breath hitched. Why was he here? In my past life, he claimed he was at his downtown office during the explosion. He played the devastated husband who arrived at the hospital hours later. Before I could process this, the passenger side door of the Mercedes opened. Someone got in, having apparently just walked out of the bank. The person leaned over, grabbing Richard by the collar of his expensive suit, and kissed him deeply, passionately, as the flames reflected in the windshield. The woman pulled back, laughing at something Richard said, and brushed a lock of auburn hair behind her ear. My coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the concrete, splashing dark liquid over my boots. It was Emily, my fiancée. My mind violently snapped the puzzle pieces together. The lawsuit in my past life wasn't just about greed. It was about covering their tracks and eliminating a variable. Richard hadn't just wanted his wife dead, he had orchestrated it. He knew about the gas leak. He knew her route. And Emily. Emily had been with him all along. When I survived and saved Sarah, I became the scapegoat for their foiled assassination plot. They ruined me together so they could be together. I stood frozen on the sidewalk as the black Mercedes calmly reversed out of the alley and drove away from the blazing inferno. I didn't just get a second chance at life. I got a front row seat to the truth. I smiled. It was a dark, broken smile. "All right, Richard," I whispered to the empty air, the sirens deafeningly close now. "You want to play a game of life and death? Let's play." I didn't go home right away. If I had walked into our apartment while the adrenaline and rage were still pumping through my veins, I would have strangled Emily the second she walked through the door. Instead, I checked into a cheap, nondescript motel on the edge of town, paying in cash. I needed time to think. I needed to build a case. In my past life, I was a victim of their narrative. This time, I was going to be the author of their destruction. As a senior architect for one of the city's top development firms, I had high-level access to municipal zoning records, utility blueprints, and city infrastructure databases. I opened my laptop and bypassed the standard security protocols using my firm's credentials. I pulled up the schematics for the intersection of 5th and Elm. The explosion had been triggered by a passing maintenance truck, creating a spark over a ruptured gas main. But the municipal database showed no scheduled maintenance for that sector. No permits pulled. No city trucks deployed. I dug deeper, tracing the license plate of the truck that had been captured on a nearby traffic camera, a detail I remembered from the endless news loops during my agonizing hospital stay in the previous timeline. The truck was registered to a shell company, Apex Industrial Solutions. A quick dive into the state's corporate registry revealed that the registered agent for Apex was a man named Gregory Powell. Gregory Powell was a senior partner at Richard Higgins' law firm. The pieces fell into place with terrifying precision. Richard hadn't just gotten lucky with a random tragedy, he had engineered it.
He used his firm's resources to hire a proxy, deliberately sabotage the high-pressure gas line, and coordinated the spark for the exact moment his wife's daily bus passed over it.
It was a calculated, cold-blooded assassination, designed to look like a tragic municipal failure. A failure he could then sue the city for, double-dipping on his wife's life insurance and a massive wrongful death settlement. And Emily was his accomplice. My phone buzzed on the motel nightstand. It was a text from Emily. "David, oh my God, I just saw the news about the Route 42 bus. Please tell me you took an earlier one. I'm shaking. Call me." The sheer sociopathic brilliance of her text made my stomach turn. She knew I took that bus. She was establishing her alibi, playing the hysterical fiancé. In my past life, she had used this exact same performance, weeping by my hospital bed until the money ran dry and I became a liability. I took a deep breath, forcing my fingers to remain steady, and typed back, "I'm fine. Caught a cab instead. Working late at the office. Love you." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in deception. I went home. I kissed Emily's cheek. I slept in the same bed as the woman who had helped plot a mass murder. Every night, while she slept, I cloned her phone. I backed up her hard drive. I sifted through her deleted files and encrypted messaging apps. It didn't take long to find the burner account. She and Richard had been having an affair for over 2 years. The messages were sickening, full of derisive comments about Sarah's boring personality and my pathetic devotion to my career. But more importantly, there were dates, times, and bank transfer receipts. Emily had acted as the bagman, transferring the payoff money from her personal offshore account to the man who drove the spark truck, a low-level thug named Leonard Vance. I compiled everything: the blueprints, the corporate registry links, the bank transfers, and the printed transcripts of their burner messages. But I didn't take it to the police. The police were slow. They were bureaucratic. Richard was a powerful litigator. He could tie up an investigation for years, muddying the waters and finding loopholes. I didn't want justice. I wanted a public execution. A month after the explosion, the city held a massive memorial service for the victims of the Route 42 tragedy. It was held in the grand atrium of City Hall, packed with grieving families, local politicians, and swarms of media. I stood near the back, wearing a sharp black suit, perfectly whole, standing on my own 2 feet. Emily was clinging to my arm, wearing a tasteful black dress, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. Up at the podium, bathed in the flashing lights of camera lenses, stood Richard Higgins. He was putting on the performance of a lifetime, his voice cracked with perfectly calibrated emotion as he spoke about his beautiful Sarah and his angelic Lily. He wiped a tear from his cheek, looking out at the crowd with hollow, sorrowful eyes. "They were my world," Richard choked out into the microphone. "And they were taken from me by gross negligence, by a city that failed to protect its citizens. I vow to you all today, I will not rest until those responsible are held fully accountable." The crowd murmured in sympathetic agreement. Emily squeezed my arm. "He's so strong," she whispered, a sickening reverence in her voice. "He really is," I replied, my voice completely deadpan. "But he's about to be a lot weaker." Emily frowned, looking up at me. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer her. Instead, I checked my watch. 10 to Livin' Blas Am. Exactly 5 minutes prior, an automated script I had written sent a massive, encrypted zip file to the inbox of every major news anchor, investigative journalist, and district attorney in the state. The file was titled The Route 42 Massacre, the Higgins-Davis Conspiracy. It contained every piece of evidence I had painstakingly gathered, laid out in an undeniable, heavily documented timeline. Simultaneously, a second script hacked into the City Hall audio-visual system. Richard was just starting his closing remarks when the giant projector screen behind him, which had been displaying a rotating gallery of the victims, suddenly glitched. The somber music cut out with a violent screech of static. The screen flashed black, then illuminated with a blown-up, high-definition screenshot of a text message exchange. The sender was labeled Emily D., and the recipient was Richard H. Emily D. The transfer to Leonard went through. The gas main is prepped for 3:15. Are you sure about this? Richard H. It's the only way we get to be together. And Rich. Just make sure your architect boy takes his usual bus. 2 birds, 1 stone. A collective gasp echoed through the massive atrium. The silence that followed was so absolute you could hear a pin drop. Richard froze, the blood draining from his face as he turned around to look at the screen. The projector cycled to the next slide, a photograph of Richard and Emily kissing in the black Mercedes, time-stamped exactly at 3:21 p.m. on the day of the explosion. The reflection of the burning bus clearly visible in the windshield. Chaos erupted. Reporters started shouting, their cameras swiveling furiously from the screen to Richard. Beside me, Emily let out a strangled, high-pitched gasp. She physically recoiled from me, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. David, what is this? This is a fake. Someone is framing us. I looked down at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt cold, clinical detachment. I remember the heat, Emily, I said softly, my voice cutting through her panic. I remember the smell of my own skin burning. I remember you walking out of my hospital room. What are you talking about? She shrieked, backing away. You weren't on the bus. You're crazy. No, I smiled. I just got off a stop early. At the front of the hall, the heavy oak doors burst open. Detectives from the major crimes unit swarmed in, pushing their way through the shocked crowd. 2 officers grabbed Richard, slamming him against the podium to cuff him while he shouted frantic legal threats that fell on deaf ears. 2 more officers were making a beeline straight for Emily. She looked at the cops, then looked at me, her face contorted in absolute desperation. She reached out, grabbing my jacket lapels. David, please, you have to tell them. You have to help me. We're getting married. I gently reached up and peeled her trembling hands off my chest. I looked directly into her terrified, tear-filled eyes and repeated the exact words she had said to me in my past life, in that cold, empty apartment. I'm sorry, Emily, I whispered, but I didn't sign up to be a caretaker. I turned my back on her as the police tackled her to the marble floor. Her screams echoed through the atrium, mingling with Richard's, a symphony of destruction that was entirely of their own making. I walked out through the heavy oak doors, stepping out onto the massive stone steps of City Hall. The morning sun was bright, the air was crisp, and my legs carried me forward, strong and unbroken. I didn't look back. The fire had finally burned out, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was completely free. Wow, what a wild ride. David didn't just escape his tragic fate, he completely flipped the script and delivered the ultimate ice-cold karma to those who tried to ruin him. Would you have done the same thing in his shoes, or tried to save them again? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insane revenge stories like this.